business. Mr Speaker, I'm moving this motion to suspend standing orders because we cannot wait another day and watch the level of anti-Semitism continue to build on our campuses unanswered. We need to put an inquiry in place before second semester begins at the end of July. There should be nothing surprising to anyone about this bill. I've been talking about a judicial inquiry into anti-Semitism on campus since November last year. On the 3rd of May, I announced I'd be preparing this bill, and I released terms of reference 3 weeks later. On the 16th of May, the Leader of the Opposition, Senator Henderson, along with several non-Green crossbenchers in the House and the other place, wrote to the Prime Minister calling on the government to establish a judicial inquiry into anti-Semitism on campus. Other crossbenchers also wrote separately to the Prime Minister asking that a judicial inquiry into anti-Semitism on campus be established. On Monday, the 3rd of June, I introduced the private member's bill for a judicial inquiry that I now seek leave to have debated. Anti-Semitism on campus is not new. The problem of campus anti-Semitism before 7 October was identified by the Australian Jewish Students Survey. It included that 64% of Australian Jewish university students experienced anti-Semitism on campus and 19% stayed away because of anti-Semitism. The massive increase in campus anti-Semitism since October 7 has included Jewish students being spat at and taunted with swastikas, the office of Jewish staff members being urinated on, academics saying that Jews don't deserve cultural safety, academics denying that the rapes on 7 October even occurred, the failure of university leaders to deal properly with anti-Semitism, including dealing with encampments, vice-chancellors implying that hate-fuelled protests are just the price Jewish students have to pay for free speech, and a collective statement from 39 university chancellors which was so weak it didn't even mention the words Jew or anti-Semitism. If this motion is successful, then we will debate a bill which provides for the establishment of a commission of inquiry with Royal Commission powers, led by a current or former judge, to inquire into anti-Semitism on university campuses. This inquiry would examine the instance of anti-Semitic activity both before and after the 7th of October. It will consider whether the response of university leaders, regulators, representative organisations and others have been adequate. Jewish communal organisations support this bill for a judicial inquiry, and they reject the general anti-racism inquiry by the Human Rights Commission. The Executive Council of Australian Jewry, which is the federal representative body of the Jewish community in Australia, has said they wholeheartedly endorse my bill. They have said, and I quote, "A judicial inquiry, as originally called for in May by Mr Leeser, would allow Jewish students and staff to give evidence in a closed hearing without having fear of reprisals from the fanatical fringe of anti-Israel or Jew-hating students or victimisation from anti-Israel and anti-Semitic faculty members. There would be no opportunity for political grandstanding by any party, and the sole focus would be getting to the truth." Unfortunately, the government's plan is not to have a standalone judicial inquiry to deal with anti-Semitism on campus, but to have a general anti-racism inquiry running for 2 years, dealing with racism against First Nations people, anti-Semitism and Islamophobia. Can I say, as a Jewish Australian, I am so sick and tired of this government, the Human Rights Commission, universities and other bodies in Australia being unable to say anti-Semitism without saying Islamophobia in the same breath. To fail to singularly identify and call out the particularity of anti-Semitism, and indeed the largest increase in anti-Semitism in our history, in and of itself is anti-Semitic. And it creates some sort of dangerous narrative for our social harmony that suggests a Jewish-Muslim conflict here in Australia, when so much of the anti-Semitism is actually propagated by the militant socialist left. Islamophobia is a bad thing, and it should be called out, and it must be called out and properly dealt with. After the September 11 terrorist attacks in 2001, there was heightened Islamophobia in this country, and no one was saying at that time we can't mention Islamophobia without mentioning anti-Semitism in the same breath. But the level and scale of anti-Semitism at the moment is unprecedented in the history of this country, a country which has had Jews here since the First Fleet and which uniquely in this world has been one of the few countries where there has been no formal discrimination against Jews. But we have to tell the truth. There's only one community who's been subjected to those vile Opera House protests, where radicals and jihadis sought to do harm to that community, and that's the Jewish community. Only one community that had its artists and creative doxed, and that's the Jewish community. Only one community subjected to the hate-filled drive-thrus in its suburbs, and that's the Jewish community. Only one community on campus that's having its students spat at and taunted and its staff officers urinated on. And the Vice-Chancellor standing by saying that's just the price you have to pay for free speech, and that's the Jewish community. Jewish Australians are so sick and tired of the moral equivalence, particularly because so many Jewish Australians are always at the forefront, pushing back against the bigotry against other groups, and yet at our time of need we feel abandoned. Martin Luther King said, "In the end, we remember not the words of our enemies but the silence of our friends." And you can't blame the Jewish community for having no confidence in the Human Rights Commission, given the Commission's record. Remember, the Commission's the body designed to prevent racism and stand for social harmony. But for more than 6 months they said nothing about the largest increase in anti-Semitism in the history of this country. At Senate estimates, the President of the Commission repeatedly refused to call out anti-Semitism and condemn Hamas. And the new Race Discrimination Commissioner, the person who'd been running the government's inquiry, could not condemn the phrase "from the river to the sea", a phrase rightly condemned by the Prime Minister and rightly condemned in a bipartisan motion in the other place. The Race Discrimination Commissioner said he'd have to see the context. There is systemic racism against Jews at the Commission, as evidenced by the statements and action of their staff and contractors. This includes the head of Hugh Consulting, who was engaged to prepare anti-racism material but was involved in the doxing of 600 Jewish creatives and publicly urged her followers to let these effing Zionists know no effing peace. Or the Commission's lawyer, who publicly stated Jewish people are not entitled to cultural safety and suggested the October 7 terrorist attacks could make sense. Referring to Jewish people, another staff member wrote, "What are they without Zionism? If we take that away, their violence, their toxicity, their racism, what's left of them as a people?" Then there was the call by Commission staff in relation to the terrorist attacks to acknowledge Israel's occupation of Palestine as the source of the violence and embed an acknowledgement of Israel's apartheid, occupation and genocide in all communications regarding this matter from the Commission. This is why Peter Wertheim from the ECAJ has said, and I quote, "Sadly, the Jewish community cannot have confidence in an inquiry to be conducted by the Australian Human Rights Commission. The AHRC's record of public statements and actions in the face of the unprecedented surge in anti-Semitism that's occurred in Australia, especially since the 7th of October, has been conspicuously deficient. The recent record of some of the people associated with the Commission also featured a shocking level of bias." Mr Speaker, yesterday the Prime Minister had fine words to say about the need to deal with anti-Semitism, words that I hope every member of this House could support. He said, and I quote, "There is no place for anti-Semitism in our communities, at our universities or outside our electorate offices. No one should be targeted for who they are. The targeting of people because they are Jewish is completely unacceptable." Today, this is the opportunity for all members to give effect to his words by supporting this urgency motion and supporting passage of this bill. Mr Speaker, at their best, universities are life-changing places where people get an education and improve their opportunities in life. It's where the next generation of leaders are formed. That's why it's so important anti-Semitism doesn't take hold. It's why it's so important students are taught about the evils of anti-Semitism, that it's important to always reject anti-Semitism however it manifests, that it's not okay to be a bystander. If we're not teaching this to the next generation, then we're setting ourselves up for a society based on conspiracy, not fact, on othering, not personal responsibility, on social discord, not social harmony. What happens on campus today sets the tone for the Australia of tomorrow. As the Leader of the Opposition has repeatedly said, this is a time for moral courage and moral clarity. We cannot have a situation in this country where Jewish staff and Jewish students are being given a message on campus that says, "You are not welcome here." It is time that this parliament said enough. It is time to support this motion and bring this bill on for debate and establish a judicial inquiry into anti-Semitism on campus to deal properly with a problem that was festering since before the 7th of October and has got manifestly worse since that time. I commend this motion to all members of the House.